Hello everybody, and welcome into day 3 of Jaws Week. And for the first time ever here on this channel, I'm releasing a video in 3D! Oh my god, wow! Look at how cool this is! It's like you can feel me reaching through the screen! Oh my god, wow! Whoa, 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 whoa! What's that? This actually isn't in 3D, and me doing this looks really, really stupid? Welcome to the average Jaws 3D watching experience for most people. Alright, so when it comes to Jaws 3D, this is where the movie series goes into full-blown B-movie territory and becomes a bit gimmicky. It came out during the 1980s, and there was this trend for third movies in the series to make them all in 3D. You had Amityville 3D, Friday the 13th Part 3 in 3D, and of course Jaws 3D. The problem with this is that when you're watching the movie and you see these effects without the actual 3D effect to go along with it, they look really bad and out of place, especially since the majority of releases of this movie over the years have been the 2D version. So you get to experience the bad-looking effects without the fun of the cheap 3D gimmick to go along with it. Released in 1983 and directed by Joe Alves, who was the production designer on the first two Jaws movies, as well as the second unit director for Jaws 2, Jaws 3D had received mostly negative response from critics and audiences and was pulled from theaters rather quickly. While still profitable, it was the first film in the series to make less than $100 million at the worldwide box office, showcasing the diminishing returns for the franchise. I guess between the release of this movie and Jaws 2, one of the original ideas was to do a full-blown spoof movie called Jaws 3 People Zero with John Hughes as one of the writers. In hindsight, they probably should have just went with this, as Jaws 3D and Jaws Revenge would become a bit of a joke anyways. Okay, I know objectively this isn't really a great movie. Hell, it's not even really a good one. But I do have a bit of a soft spot for Jaws 3D. So with that being said, let's take a look at Jaws 3D and see why it's kind of a bit of a punching bag. So as the movie begins, we get the point of view of the shark as it attacks a fish, along with our first glimpse at those incredibly fake-looking 3D effects. Which I wish I could watch in 3D, but I can't get these goddamn active 3D glasses to work! I got the 3D TV, I got the 3D player, and hell, these fucking things say they're synced up, but it doesn't fucking work! So I guess I gotta stick with the 2D version. Active 3D sucks. After that fake-looking effect, we also get our first taste of the score for the movie. Unfortunately, John Williams didn't return to do the score for this one, so instead the score this time around was composed by Alan Parker. Now, despite John Williams not doing the music, I actually quite like the score for Jaws 3D. While the main Jaws theme is still in there, the rest of the score has a bit of a different motif to it, and it really suits this film quite well. Unlike the previous two films in the series that took place in Amity, Jaws 3D instead takes place at SeaWorld in Florida during preview week. I do appreciate the setting change this time around, as it allows for the shark and the story to go in some new directions and not have to rely on anything from Amity. Well, for the most part. In a story movie that was forced on by the studio, Jaws 3D brings back the Brody boys from the first two films, who just so happen to deal with yet another great white shark problem. First, we have Mike Brody, who was the chief engineer of SeaWorld, played by Dennis Quaid. In an interview done many years later, Dennis Quaid stated that during the making of Jaws 3, he was absolutely coked out of his mind, and I can kind of see it during certain sequences. Then there's his brother Sean, played by John Putch, who now looks to be in his early 20s, while Mike is in his late 20s and early 30s. This begins to raise some questions about the movie's continuity. The last we saw of Sean was in Jaws 2, which was set around 1978, where he was just a little kid. This movie was released in 1983, and there's no way this kid could have gone from this to that in just 5 years. So does this mean that Jaws 3D is set at some point in the future? It's never fully explained in the movie. This could have all been avoided if they just called them something else. I have no clue why they needed to be the Brody boys in this movie. It doesn't really add much to the movie, and in retrospective, this was more of a standalone movie anyways, as the events of it don't get acknowledged in Jaws the Revenge. Aside from the Brody boys, the other characters we follow in this film include Mike's girlfriend, Dr. Kathryn Morgan, played by Bess Armstrong, who acts as the park's senior biologist. There's Philip Fitzroy, played by Simon McCorkindale, who is a bit of an arrogant oceanographer, but he's not fully a bad guy per se. He actually is crucial in saving everyone's lives by the end of the movie. He's also accompanied by his friend Jack, played by P.H. Moriarty, who acts as his assistant and helps document what he does. There's also Calvin Bouchard, played by Gossett Jr., fresh off of winning his Academy Award for Officer and a Gentleman. He plays the manager of SeaWorld, who runs the day-to-day operations of the park. Then finally, rounding out the cast includes Sean Brody's love interest, Kelly, played by Leah Thompson in her first ever film role.
But you're so thin.
That's right, Marty McFly's MILF of a mom is in this movie too, and at the peak of her hotness. Not to mention, she's into a guy named Sean. Hello, that's me.
I bet I can overcome your childhood fears.
It should have been me, not him! It's not fair!
Anyways, after some of the opening POV shots, the shark makes its way into the open gate of SeaWorld and damages it. One of the mechanics named Shelby Overman decides that instead of fixing it now with others around to help him out, he instead waits until sunset where there's a lot less light and with nobody else around to help him out in case something goes wrong. Needless to say, it doesn't work out so well for him as he's killed by the shark, and we get to see more of those incredible looking 3D effects. With Shelby's disappearance, Mike and Kay decide to take their yellow submarine to go looking for him and end up being attacked by a great white shark. However, before they become fish food, they end up being saved by some dolphins named Cindy and Sandy, aka the real heroes of the movie. So with the great white shark loose in the park, Kay suggests they capture it since no other facility on the planet has one in captivity, which Calvin thinks would be good for business. Eventually they do capture it and put it out for display, but it ends up dying in captivity shortly afterwards.
Geez, for a Jaws movie, I expected a little more from the shark than that.
Well, it turns out after they find Overman's body, they realize that their shark couldn't have killed him because it was actually a baby and the mother had given birth inside the park. This is when we finally get our first look at Mama Jaws, aka the biggest shark in the entire series at 35 feet in length.
Now, while the 3D effects don't look great, some of the practical effects of the shark actually look pretty good in this film.
By this point, they were kind of experts on making animatronic sharks. It's just kind of a shame they didn't really utilize it that much. I think this movie would have gone over a lot better if they just focused on these type of effects as opposed to the not so great looking 3D ones. Anyways, now that Mama Jaws has made herself known, this is where we begin to see her go on a bit of a rampage, and also when the movie gets a little fun. I just wish they went a little further with it. While the shark manages to scare some people, she doesn't really eat anyone during this scene. The most she does is injure a few swimmers, including Kelly, where she gets a pretty nasty looking gash in her leg. The shark also attacks this underwater tunnel area, trapping a bunch of people inside. So with the people trapped underwater, Philip Fitzroy and Jack decide to use themselves as live bait to trap the shark, while Mike makes repairs in the tunnels so people could escape. Unfortunately for Philip, his rope he used for escape snaps on him and he ends up getting eaten by the shark. But in kind of a strange way, where he kind of ends up trapped in the shark's mouth, not fully chewed up, and conveniently holding his grenade with him.
So at this point, we get the big climax in the movie, and let me tell you, it gets pretty silly.
After killing Fitzroy, the shark goes after Mike and Kay, who manage to free the people trapped in the tunnels and then escape the shark thanks in part to the help of the dolphins. They end up in the underwater control room where we get probably the most famous scene in the movie, and not necessarily because it's a good scene. As Mike and Kay try to catch their breath, the shark, which now looks like a still PNG image and doesn't even look like it's swimming, slowly makes its way to the control room and breaks the glass.
Yeah, there's no defending this. It looks pretty terrible, especially since I can't even watch the 3D version of it, but even then, it still looks pretty bad.
Shark still looks fake.
So the shark breaks through and eats Calvin's nephew. However, it then becomes trapped, and this is when Mike and Kay notice that Philip is still in the shark's mouth somehow, still holding the grenade from earlier. How it manages to stay despite all the moving around the shark does is beyond me, but I'll just roll with it. They then manage to pull the pin and blow up the shark. It's nowhere near as exciting as the stuff we got in the last two movies. Hell, we were even denied a great one-liner because it's underwater. But once the shark is destroyed, the dolphins then show up to help celebrate its defeat, and we can now go about our merry way.
So that was Jaws 3D, a film that's a considerable step down from 1 and 2. With that being said, though, it's still kind of fun in that B-movie sort of way.
Jaws 3D is an interesting one. Out of the four main Jaws films, it feels the least connected to the rest of the series. It's the only one that doesn't take place in Amity, which gives it its own unique identity, and that's a good thing. Setting it at a theme park and having a shark loose and attacking everyone is a fun concept for a Jaws movie. In a lot of ways, this movie kind of feels like a precursor to Jurassic World, where you have a monster loose at the theme park where a lot of people get eaten. Ironically enough, both movies were made by Universal and were sequels to Spielberg movies. But the only problem with that is that in this movie, the shark doesn't really do that much. When you go back and look at all the victims, the shark kills Shelby at the beginning, 2 coral stealers, Philip Fitzroy, and Calvin's nephew at the end. Sure, it injures Kelly and a few people who were swimming, but there was a whole buffet of people ready to be eaten, and we didn't get that. I wanted to see this thing eat as many people as possible. It would have made it a lot more fun.
There's just so much you could do with this big, huge-ass shark attacking people at SeaWorld, and you know what? Let's talk about SeaWorld for a second.
The movie is one giant-ass advertisement for SeaWorld. It's kind of a weird one when you think about it. Come to SeaWorld, where you risk being eaten by a giant great white shark. Seems like kind of an odd bit of advertisement to me when you show that your theme park isn't really a safe place to take families, but sure, whatever, just roll with it. Now, there are some things I really do like in Jaws 3D. I like the score, some of the practical effects are good, I like the setting, and the cast is pretty likable for the most part. Also, I know I spent the majority of this video nagging on the bad effects, but they do have a little bit of charm to them in that they're so bad that they make me laugh. But that also leads to my main problem with this movie. It's a movie more focused on cheap gimmicks and being an ad for SeaWorld than it is about telling a good story. The movie has some other flaws too. Joe Alves may be a phenomenal production designer, but directing isn't a strong suit. A lot of the sequences lack the intensity of excitement of what Spielberg and Schwartz brought in the first 2 films, aside from maybe the Fitzroy death scene. But even then, the shark moves so damn slow that I feel like it could have easily gotten away from it. Also, while the cast may be likable and act just fine,
there isn't really any compelling character stuff or a true standout performance that helps elevate this movie. But perhaps there might have been in one of the earlier cuts. According to the director, there supposedly does exist around 20 minutes of deleted scenes. They don't appear in any of the physical media releases I own, but I managed to find a few still images of them online. These scenes might have helped to give us a little bit more reason to care about these characters and to help them stand out more, but given that we can't see this version of the movie, I just have to go along with what's in the theatrical cut. As it stands, Jaws 3D is a movie where I feel some mixed emotions towards it. If you compare it to the first two movies, then it looks a lot worse by comparison. It's not really a good movie, but I still have a bit of a soft spot for it. I used to enjoy this one more as a kid, but as I get older, it has less of an effect on me. It never quite lives up to the potential of its fun premise. Had it gone a little bit more over the top and given us some more shark carnage, really embracing that B-movie feel to it, then it probably would have worked a lot better. Now, I'm someone who isn't generally for remakes. I especially don't want to see them ever remake Jaws, but I'd actually be okay for doing a remake of Jaws 3D and going way crazier with the concept of Jaws in a theme park. But until that day arrives, at least there's just a little bit of fun to be had with Jaws 3D.
So that was my review on Jaws 3D. What did you think of the movie? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Be sure to come back tomorrow as things get personal and we finish up reviewing the Jaws movies with a film that pretty much killed the franchise, so that should be fun. But anyways, as always, take care now. Bye-bye then, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace out.